Recently, it's been announced that A24 has partnered with Google to use their DeepMind unit to develop new AI-powered technologies for filmmakers. Even though I know primarily we discuss things related to books on this channel, this is more so, of course, rooted in filmmaking, though I still wanted to talk about it. One, because we have seen the ways that AI is being integrated in publishing spaces, and then also we have found that even though books and movies are two different mediums, at the end of the day, both are vehicles to tell stories and represent artists, and thus I felt like it was related. And also, all of this is pretty connected anyway. It just goes to show the difference between people who truly care about telling stories that have to do with the human condition and analyzing the world that we live within versus companies who just want to profit and make money. Before we get into our opinions about this whole issue, I did want to actually go through some of the information about this deal because I think they're trying to draw from people's lack of knowledge about filmmaking. So I think there is a level of trying to deceive you in what they're going to use these AI tools for. But make no mistake, it's just to, once again, eliminate people's jobs and rob artists from the opportunity to actually speak using their art form. A24 and Google have struck an AI research partnership that will see the independent studio work with Google's DeepMind unit to develop new AI-powered technologies for filmmakers. Google's roughly $75 million investment is tied to the partnership and is in line with what Thrive Capital invested during the studio's last funding round, according to the Wall Street Journal. The partnership will give A24 access to DeepMind's research and infrastructure, while DeepMind researchers will work with the studio to build out new workflows. The deal does not give Google access to A24's content library or its data. The deal represents the latest marriage between a Hollywood studio and AI in an era where companies have oscillated between partnerships and lawsuits. Disney's short-lived deal with OpenAI to license its characters came as it sued AI companies like Minimax and Midjourney for copyright infringement, while Lionsgate expanded its partnership with the AI firm Runway AI to develop new intellectual property and produce AI-generated shows drawing from its existing franchises. Netflix also purchased Ben Affleck's AI startup Interpositive, aimed at building tools for filmmakers, earlier this year. A24 partner Scott Belsky, who leads the studio's technology division A24 Labs, told the Journal the studio's Google partnership differed from other deals because AI developers mistakenly advertised their products as a means to make films cheaper and faster. His division is developing applications for AI-generated storyboards. Quote, "We think there are better uses that preserve creative control and support risk-taking," he told the Journal, arguing the new tools, quote, "won't look anything like the prompted generation type of AI that people feel uncomfortable with. We believe breakthroughs happen when you get technology into the hands of the best minds in the field," Eli Collins, a vice president of product for DeepMind, told the Journal. A24 has been a landing pad for many emerging filmmakers with the critical and commercial success of its roster of films: Lady Bird, Moonlight, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Marty Supreme, and the recent box office winner Backrooms, owed to its trust placed in the filmmakers it's enlisted and the fervent, largely young fan base it has amassed. Roughly 85% of those who saw Backrooms during its opening weekend were under 35, according to post-track data. The agreement comes as roughly half of adults under 30 believe AI will harm society, according to a Pew Research study published last week. First off, just starting right from that last part, it is not a belief that AI will harm. It already has. It's not a belief, it's a fact. And I know that people like to throw around this idea that there's like different concepts of harm. Every concept of harm, every concept of harm has already shown itself to cause. For example, there have been people who have been struggling and they tried to use AI to ask it advice and it has encouraged them to harm themselves, and then they have followed through with that. I don't know how you can get more obvious examples of harm, but then on top of all of that, obviously a lot of people have lost their jobs because of AI. That is harm in its own way because it makes it much harder for people to get by in life. The cost of living isn't exactly cheap either, and it's not easy to just pick up a new job. And if you want to learn a new craft, a new field, oftentimes that requires a degree, which also costs money. And if you have bills to pay, kids to take care of, people who depend on you, it's not exactly easy to just go back and get a new skill. A lot of people act as though new advancements in technology are always going to have this wave of like, well, people are being replaced and they have to adapt with the times. We do not have to adapt to this. It doesn't add anything of value. If we're talking about the ways in which AI can be used to help in healthcare, for example, to provide a diagnosis much faster than we typically had before, that's very different. This is not. So we have literal physical harm that has come to people as a result of AI. We have instances where people are losing their jobs and their livelihoods as a result, and they have no protections in place also, or if they do, it's not enough. Then you have environmental impacts, which not only have started to happen, what will be much worse once you have a lot more data centers in place. If you haven't looked into the data center information that is within Utah, that is definitely a perfect example of that. I live in Arizona. It's already incredibly hot where I live, and it's estimated that it's going to continue to get hotter and hotter. And I can't imagine, it's already miserable to be here. And tying things back to finances, it's not just like, oh, it's a little hotter now, but this is going to affect wildlife. It affects people's ability to pay their bills because this impacts how much you have your AC on. And try living in Arizona in the summer without air conditioning. It's brutal. It's going to have an enormous impact, and it already has had an enormous impact. So I already a little bit am taking issue with this idea of like, well, young people, they just think it's probably going to be bad. It is bad. How many instances do we have to provide? How much data already has to be provided? Can your AI already not surmise that it's harmful and then just stop itself? Also, working our way back up. So it's referencing this new film, Backrooms. The person that kind of was the entire imagination behind this story has said if they could snap their fingers and make this sort of AI go away, they would. Thus, not only is this a betrayal to a lot of people who have put their faith and their money towards A24, but also how awful to incorporate this sort of thing into your studio when you also simultaneously are benefiting off of creative minds. I did a video that is somewhat similar to this, talking about how publishing has been doing similar things. So if you're interested in seeing how we have examples of this within that also, then I'll have that linked. But this idea, this kind of deceitful way of presenting the information like, oh, don't worry, it's not going to have access to our works. We're not giving it access to our stuff. We're just using it because the brightest minds coupled with technology can have the best results. Then they tried to sneak in like, I mean, we are going to use it for storyboards. And this is the part where I'm like, do you think people aren't going to take a second to look into what storyboards are? Storyboards are opportunities for a lot of the cinematography decisions, a lot of what the placement of things is. There's a lot of artistry just in the idea of storyboards. It's where the visualization process kind of begins. If you erase that element, you're asking AI to try and create this based off of what's already existing. And this isn't even getting into the fact that all of this sort of AI is theft in the first place. So it's going to create something that has already existed. It's not transformative. It's just going to play around with and present things without necessarily having intention behind it, unless you literally are trying to request it to replicate a different style, in which case that's also not transformative at all. I urge people who don't know anything about storyboards to look into The Glass Worker. If you don't know anything about this film, I actually did a review for it over on my side channel. I thought it was fantastic, but just learning about how this film was made is an incredibly emotional story, as well as being one of those things that just makes you filled with hope. It's incredible. So some information about The Glass Worker. This is an animated film. It's entirely hand-drawn, and it was made in Pakistan, where the person who was kind of like the brain behind all of it, there is no animation studio where he lived. So rather than taking his talents and his passions elsewhere, he wanted to be able to have that within his home country. So him and other people, he kind of brought everyone together. He took what he knew, he taught other people, and together they created from the ground up their own studio and produced this film. Also, the story is really, really beautiful as well, and it's wonderful to get to see people who are from Pakistan get to actually implement some of their own culture into the film. highly recommend looking into it. I'll have some links about this, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because in the process of describing how they built up their studio, they talk about the storyboards, and just seeing the level of detail that went into the storyboards, that alone is incredibly admirable. And also, I think a lot of people have no idea how much is still hand-drawn. There's this idea that everything is just digital these days, and there's this idea that to do everything digitally is to remove any amount of effort that goes into things, which is not true. Almost always when people have these views, it's because they don't actually have any experience trying to create art. I also would highly recommend looking into behind the scenes for something like Arcane, because when you see the amount of thought that went into how they did the backgrounds, how they were going to have the characters interact with the backgrounds, how they were going to change the perspective, and then also just the decision making for the entire aesthetic of the show. Looking into all of that, you realize how much goes into it. So the idea of, oh no, don't worry, we're just gonna use them for storyboard type of stuff, you know, like that's no big deal. Yes, it is. You want a human behind every step of the process when you are creating art. Also this idea that, oh, in the past, these other groups, they mistakenly were trying to present it as it's gonna make things cheaper and faster. That's not what we're doing. We're special. That's not true. This idea of eliminating the storyboard process as not also falling under the umbrella of making things cheaper and faster is a joke. That is clearly what part of it is. They're just trying to find ways to present this as inoffensive as possible, but a lot of people that appreciate the studio for what it was originally, they can see through it. I think it's hilarious that they think that their fan base that they have cultivated and at this point now are trying to take advantage of. It's amusing to me that they don't think that this is going to hurt them. And I know that $75 million is a lot of money, but when it comes to film and television, I'm also like, really? For 75 million? There's also something that I find reprehensible and disgusting about this idea of, to once again quote it, the deal does not give Google access to A24's content library or its data. And then this article also is talking about how you saw Disney temporarily wanted to have a partnership with AI while simultaneously suing for copyright infringement. So there's this idea of, well, we're the big company, we have the funds, so anybody that steals from us in any capacity, we will go after, and we will go after viciously, and we will bury you. However, we're going to steal from the little guy. That is what this is. So A24 doesn't want to allow Google to have access to their content library. But where do most people think that the AI has gotten its content from? It's gotten it from other films, other things that people upload. There are people that spend so much time because they just have a passion sharing something that they've created online. It doesn't even have to be for profit or to try and gain any recognition. They just do it because they enjoy it. And they share it with all of us, and that allows us to also then get to enjoy it. And that's a beautiful connection among humans, and yet that is going to be used for you to make more money. I hope that this backfires and fails tremendously on their end. This fan base that they have developed is so disappointed in this decision that it actually in the long run costs them more money than what they are temporarily saving and gaining from this partnership. It is the only way that I imagine that they are going to maybe right their wrongs in this particular moment. I wanted to segue now into why, even though I completely understand why so many people feel very betrayed by this, why I actually had a feeling that we were headed in this direction. And I'm very curious, as I provide my example, if there are other things that for you are showing that writing is on the wall for other groups as well. But the reason that I was fairly certain that this is where we would arrive is because I had a bad feeling about the state of A24 when I saw that they were doing, of all things, an Elden Ring adaptation. If you don't know anything about Elden Ring, a quick little summation here. Elden Ring is a extremely successful and popular video game. Established itself for not only its aesthetic, but also its brutal combat. Elden Ring is gorgeous. There's so much to the world. There's so much to the lore. There's so much to the atmosphere. And it is something that has prompted a deep love among a lot of gamers, to a point where there are insane deep dives about this game, and the people that do these, the amount of effort that they put in just trying to understand the lore in this. It's a really interesting approach to gaming and to how you present the story or what you omit from the story and allow the gamer to place within it. And also, if you don't want to do that and you just want to play the game, it has that for you as well. It also has a multiplayer within actual Elden Ring, as well as something called Elden Ring Night Reign. So it has an immense amount of success, and for good reason. I've had complicated feelings about different kinds of adaptations in the past. One of them is related to video games and how they get adapted, so I'll talk about that in just a moment. But I have always had some discomfort around when things that are previously animated get live action adaptations, because at times I recognize it's a way to bring a story to a new audience, or it's a way of breathing new life into maybe something that's a little bit on the older side. But at the same time, it has always felt like it's a bit of a slap in the face to animation, and that it doesn't actually value a certain kind of artistry. It's like we aren't capable, or at least it feels as though studios think that we aren't capable of understanding really, really wonderful storytelling unless it mirrors us visually in the most superficial way, meaning literally live action. So I've always had complicated feelings, but it's a very nuanced topic, and it's not necessarily a topic for today. The other area that I've had somewhat complicated feelings is when I see things that were previously video games being adapted into movies. I have less fear about these sorts of adaptations because it is a different medium, and so I like the idea that the more mediums that you have a story within, the more opportunities you have for people to gain access to certain kinds of stories, to certain kinds of worlds, to different themes. And I think ultimately I've seen this as a relative good. It just depends on the reason why you want to adapt something. So in this particular instance, and the reason I've been wary for a while about A24 with Elden Ring, is because it felt like they took something that already is likely, if you're really looking at it, I would say objectively, but it's still, of course, a subjective thing. But if you look at Elden Ring, part of what makes it work as well as it does is the medium that it exists within. So to make a movie off of this, I was hopeful that maybe they would explore something within the lore, because it's not really a game where there is a set story as you're progressing through the game. It's not like a Final Fantasy type of game. And I was thinking, well, I think it's a little odd that they went with Elden Ring. It kind of feels like they went with Elden Ring because it's already massively successful. And if you're not into video games, I think people don't realize how successful video games are. Video games make so much money. Sometimes filmmakers dream of making the kind of money that video games make. So seeing this, I thought, all right, well, I'll wait and see the details that come out. And it does seem like Alex Garland, who is involved with the Elden Ring adaptation, it definitely seems like he has a passion for it. So this is in no way meant to be a criticism of him. It seems like he truly wants to do something with it. He has a vision, and that's great. But it does feel as though there are two different ways that a lot of people are trying to stand out right now. A lot of different groups. They're trying to find their next big MCU/Game of Thrones. That's been an ongoing conversation if you are a book fan or a fantasy fan, is what is going to be the next Game of Thrones. We have seen article after article after article about it. Anytime there is a fantasy adaptation, it was, is this the next Game of Thrones? So I think a lot of groups have been looking for that, and a lot of groups have been looking for their new MCU. It's a concern for a lot of people who are fans of Sanderson's Cosmere's. Is it going to be adapted well, or is it going to be adapted where it's just a thing to milk over and over again because people are fatigued from the MCU? And the more details that were coming out about the Elden Ring adaptation, the more concerned I was getting that this is where we would naturally arrive, because it felt less like A24 wanted to tell an interesting story, which the movie could be great, but it seemed as though rather than wanting to tell an interesting story, they were trying to tap into an existing fan base so that they could get into the From Software universe, because there are so many other video games that, depending on how they manage Elden Ring, there are so many other routes they could go down. They could make even more Elden Ring content because there's so much lore. So they could just kind of milk that over and over again. They could try to negotiate a way to do other video games made by this company. And now I'm thinking, well, I don't think you're going to make as much money off of this as you originally thought, because a lot of the same people that take issue with this deal, they're gamers, or they are people who value the storytelling component. Even if it's not a direct means of storytelling, they still appreciate that. They appreciate artistic decision making. They appreciate artistry in general. And I really think that this is going to harm A24. Anything that I referenced, I will have in the description bar. So if you'd like to read through this article, if you'd like to check out anything to do with the glass worker, anything of that sort, I'll have all the information below. And if you want to provide your own thoughts about this, if you're just disappointed and you want to talk about it, feel free to do that as well. I'm very sorry to people who are huge fans of the studio and who are big into movies, because I can only imagine how frustrating this is. But anyway, I wish I could end things on a more positive note, but I suppose I'll say go watch original works like The Glass Worker and support artists, support them however you can, whether it's following them, subscribing to their Patreons, buying their prints. Just continue to support artists. They need it now more than ever. Thanks so much for watching, though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.